Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Quantum Leap. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I really appreciate this episode just kind of being like, an action romantic comedy. I think that's such a really unique thing that I didn't think about it last episode, but every episode kind of has its own little kind of like, there's this like overwhelming like hope and beautiful like element of like, you can almost do like different genres because last episode was kind of like your underdog story. And this one is just, like I said, an action romantic comedy. So it's just like, it's so interesting. Ben finds himself in the body of Ava, who turns out to be a bounty hunter, and a partner in more ways than one is Jay, played by Justin Hartley, which obviously, you know, my first introduction to Justin Hartley was probably like him as Oliver Queen in Smallville. But NBC-wise, I've never seen the show. I should check it out at some point in time, obviously. I don't know if the tears I'm probably going to shed probably watching it, but obviously it's like, right, this is us. It just ended not too long ago, not that long ago at least. So it's just, yeah, it's just like, oh, and also the actor who plays Ava's dad was just in a short-lived NBC show called The Endgame, which I'm super bummed that didn't get a second season, but you know, but I just thought that was just kind of interesting. And so it is this interesting partnership they have. They're hunting a guy. And I love that the guy that Ben threw his drink on early on in the episode, the beginning, the guy that was like flirting with him at the end of last episode / the beginning of this episode, that guy is a guy they're after. So chase after him. And I love that it's like, oh, wait, you should have told me who you were. And Edison's like, wow, he thinks that's the reason why you turned him down. Wow, because it's like, right, you just got, within 30 seconds, you got hit on, harassed, and called a nasty, because the guy called her a bitch because Ben threw his drink on. So, thought that was, yeah. And ended up knocking him out with one good punch. And Jake's like, whoa, have you been, like, practicing boxing or something this time? Ben's like, yeah, actually I have. It's like, yeah. That's also the cool thing. Like, obviously, every experience he goes through, which might actually play into the overarching story. Well, because the fact is, everywhere he goes isn't 100% random. I mean, there's a multitude of possibilities, but it's all going towards one single end goal. It's just about finding a random path, like trying to path out where, what, you know, a certain amount of jumps will get him to where he's trying to go. But it might be the thing of, it's not just, you know, there's typical storytelling of, it's not just the destination, it's the journey along the way. Everything Ben goes through, those experiences he carries over with them. Not only what he knows, but what he picked up, like obviously the boxing lessons he picked up last episode, those are going to be important going forward, because if he ever needs to defend himself, he's got those boxing skills to some extent, you know? So, might not be in a body that can adequately, like, you know, doesn't, you know, it does, like, because he was in a very athletic body last episode. But, you know, those skills are still there. The muscle memory is there, even if he's in a different body. So it could be that these little things he's picking up, these experiences, these skills are all going to be necessary to get to the very end, you know? You know, I guess you can almost look at it, think of it from like video game perspective of like, right, you're going to need a certain skill to progress to the next, like to get further in the game. So it's kind of like that. He's building up his repertoire of skills. That's what I'm reading into it, but maybe that's me overthinking it. But, yeah, things get complicated. Like the moment he walked in on, like, because it's like, oh, your dad's business, like, oh, the door's never open. I'm like, what's this about? I was like, oh, don't tell me something scary, sucky's about to happen, like her dad's dead or something. I was like, well, Addison didn't say anything about it. Well, they go in, and like the fact is that, well, he goes in, and it was like, oh, I was like, is it a surprise party? He's like, nope, it's a proposal. And it's like, oh, cool. And it's like, I need more time. And it's like, wait, what? And it's like, oh, that's the last thing you want to hear, especially when Ava's dad is like, hey, wait, don't tell me you said no. It's like, no, I didn't say no. I just said I need more time. And Jake's like, what's there to think about? You know, so that's kind of rough. And I love that, once again, I don't know whether it's just that Ben is just naturally empathetic, but when he's taking over these people's body, it does seem like he becomes them. And maybe this is something that's true to the original Quantum Leap as well, but I feel like after last episode, like how emotional he got like when, with that whole brother situation going on last episode, it feels like this episode, he really like puts himself in Ava's shoes and like he wants things to work out for him. But even later on, he admits it's because he hadn't had, this is his first time getting to talk to Addison, because at the end of last episode, he remembered like, oh, he has someone special waiting for him. And obviously Addison's trying to hide the fact it's her. Like, we don't want to throw too much at him too much at him too quickly, because we're trying to figure out what he did know and what he does, what Ben was really up to beforehand. It's kind of the whole point. So, but because he's got that longing situation going on, like, oh, there's some love of his that's out there, someone that he's deeply in love with waiting for him, he's kind of putting it on this relationship. So if he can make things work out in this relationship, maybe that kind of bodes well for his own circumstances. Because sadly, it turns out in the original timeline, Jake and Ava he moves to Illinois, she stays in working here in, with her dad, and neither one of them ever got married or had children of their own, because they never stopped loving each other. So it's like, right, they're meant to be, so all the while trying to figure out how to, because it's this complicated thing of like, for Ben, it's like Ava chooses not to marry him in the original timeline for whatever reason. Obviously, like, I think the conversation comes up of like, right, she's scared. Your life is one way for so long, and then when you introduce another person to it, things kind of have to change. Things don't just have to change; they will change, and it comes with the complications. We'll get to that in a second when we really kind of discuss that conversation. But Ben doesn't want to make that decision for Ava. It should be her choice. So, he's trying to like buy enough time till he can jump so Ava could be back here, but he's also still rooting for them because he doesn't want to completely destroy her. Doesn't want to say yes, because that might not be what Ava wants, but at the very least, he wants to keep things going along long enough so that he can jump and Ava can be the one who makes the choice. But they end up going after one of the Bell's bond. That's a very important case. It's about a woman with like unpaid parking tickets who's got to go to court named Tammy. Well, it turns out some cartel people want Tammy, and it's like, well, what's this all about? Well, it turns out her boyfriend Zach kind of sells some drugs, and obviously it's like, oh, like Zach is, she made some reference to like, oh, you're smart. And she's like, yeah, my Zach is, Zach's smart. Like, the feds are trying to turn him, but it's like, no, they won't. And she's like, he's smart like me. And Ben's like, yeah, super smart that you got 5 parking tickets. And it's like, yeah, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, why are you getting parking tickets? That's going to like jeopardize your own circumstances. Like, you put yourself in this situation by getting in these parking tickets. I'm like, what was that about? And I guess that should have been kind of like the first red flag. I'm like, something's a little off about that. But she's so in love, and I just love that shenanigans filled adventure thing we kind of got going on. And I'm like, okay, especially when Tammy's offering advice later on because this is all about a drug cartel that's pretty like rising up, especially around this time and taking over, like, I think they said cocaine. Well, while Jake and Ava are having their conversation, Tammy's like, well, she's just scared, doesn't want to give up her independence. Like I said, I think there is that conversation of, because if they get engaged and eventually married, they'll move to Illinois away from not only her dad, but also her job. And she does like this. And because the plan was initially like, hey, let's move to Illinois and get out of this job that is so dangerous. And then while this is all happening, Tammy escapes. I'm like, okay, so she's going to go check on Zach, and that's going to turn her whole thing. Until we got that beautiful reveal, she's actually the head of the cartel, which makes sense in many different regards, because it's like, right, because people are going to underestimate her because she's a lady, so no one's going to assume like, oh, she's the head of the cartel. Especially this, no one's going to think that. And I think that's also supposed to be especially because she goes to the trouble of being Tammy. I think that was supposed to like disarm anyone. So no one would see her. Like, she created this fake persona. And she ends up killing Zach, and it's like, there really was a relationship between them, but Zach was off selling like coke or whatever on his own. And she's like, oh, like, the fact is, what she was saying about like, oh, like Zach would never tell them. She's like, no, I saw you were making kind of a profit on your own. So she's like, I can't take the chance that you might talk to the cops. I was thinking like, are they going to save her? It's like, save Zach? It's like, nope, he gets popped. You're like, damn. And shows how ruthless she is. She's willing to, it's like, right, despite everything, it's like, my business and my self-preservation matter more than my love for you. I do care about you, but I care about me and my business more. So you got to go, especially when you're jeopardizing all of that. So, and now it pieces it together. Like, and Carla isn't just some, member of she doesn't work for this cartel. She's the head of this cartel. And so now, sadly, Ben and, Ava and Jake break up because for Jake, he's like, right, you don't want to give up this job. It means a lot to you. He's like, you enjoy this. And he's like, I don't want you to end up moving to Illinois with me and us being engaged for you to just eventually resent me. It's like, right, I was so blind and not willing to see the answer was in front of me the entire time, because the entire time I've been waiting for an answer. Like, what was wrong? Why didn't you immediately say yes? Like, is it more or no? And Ben kept stringing him along because it's like, no, I don't want to give you the answer because it's not my answer to give. And Ben, realizing like, man, I was so focused on my own circumstances, I was pushing on them because like, it wasn't some cosmic timeline thing that made it that they didn't work out. It's just like maybe they just weren't meant to be. Why they didn't get together in the original timeline. So it wasn't some like, cosmic love story to some extent is what he's kind of putting it as. But he got advice from Ava's dad about sometimes the answer is right in front of you, and that ended up being a key thing in more ways than one. So, but they ended up finding Tammy, Carla, because her parking tickets were always in front of the train station because she'd take the train to a certain place and then go somewhere else. It's part of like her drug deal situation and how she made contacts, and she was also got like a suitcase full of money. Her like, it's time to bail, disappeared. That's why in the original timeline she like disappeared, because she got to the suitcase and was able to disappear, no one knowing. Because it's not until 2022 that like Addison was like, yeah, there's currently a theory that the head of the this particular cartel was a woman. And I was like, that's what pieced it together, that Carla was not just an employee, she was the head of the organization. But I thought it was beautiful that Jack showed up too. I said Jake showed up and it's like, oh, Jake, you're here. And it's like, yeah, your dad called and said like, what am I doing? Like letting you handle this on your own. And Addison was about to stop him, but she's like, you know what? I'm gonna let him do his thing. And it was very beautiful. He's like, right, we could see this through and then we can talk about things afterwards. So luckily they end up stopping Carla, but I love that whole thing of he's like, well, actually, I was going to propose at Christmas or whatever, and she's rolling her eyes like, oh my God, just stop. Like, he was like, I'm going to propose again, but this time at Christmas. But that was in reference to the thing that the taser, and ended up tasing Carla and getting her shocking the suitcase to shock her, losing all her money because everyone in the train station nearby immediately comes and grabs it up. So it's like, cool, you're going to jail and you lost all your money. It's like, once again, it's this really sweet ending that you're like, aw. And even Addison's like, hey, I can tell you how it's going to play out. But he's like, no, once I jump, Ava will be the one who gets to make the choice. But he wants to believe like, no, it's all going to work out for them in the end. And I think it was going to anyway, but Addison kind of spoils it. That is like, okay, they do eventually get together in this timeline now, and they do end up having children. And her, because she says like Ava's father becomes a grandfather. So I was like, that's really, really sweet. It's like, once again, it feels like this is that. I mean, I think there's been bounty hunting like romantic. Wasn't it like Gerard Butler and Jennifer Aniston. Jesus, I don't know why I butchered a name like that. Gerard Butler and Jennifer Aniston. I think there was a bounty hunting movie that was like a actiony rom-com. So yeah, but I was like, this does seem like this is a premise that like it's a movie all on its own if it was like extended. But like I said, I think it's such a neat thing that a show like, and maybe this is probably applicable to the original show as well, being able to kind of bend so many genres and kind of be able to do so many different forms of storytelling in this one story. And I think that's such a neat element to be able to do something like that storytelling wise. But this whole situation sparked Ben's memories. He started remembering more and more until now he remembers Addison. He's like, you're the woman I love. And she's like, yeah, Ben, it is me. Sadly they can't touch, no matter, until he gets back, they can't touch, so. And that bittersweet moment of like, right, everything worked out for Jake and Ava in the long run, but sadly Addison and Ben's story continues to be not really even on par, because it kind of got reset, but now it's kind of playing out. Now it's like, just kind of another leap, and just but maybe that's one leap closer to home, back home to her. So we'll see. But this episode also introduced some other interesting elements. Obviously, Jen ended up having to talk to Addison about the discoveries last episode about, right, Ben lying sometimes about being where he claimed, well, he wasn't where he claimed he was going to be, and it was him meeting up with Janice and them working on their project. And now it's like, right, now we're going to have to look back on all, like, a lot of points of your relationship and look at your calendars and stuff. And anytime Ben said that he was somewhere, was he actually there or was he lying? And now it is a situation of, if Ben ends up being the person she believes him to be, then Addison can forgive him. But if he turns out not to be, then I won't have to worry about forgiving him. But it's still like, that's rough regardless. Because she's saying it so casually, but obviously you can see with the hurt in her eyes and the pain in her voice, it's not going to be easy, because she's still dealing with and coming to terms with the fact is that Ben isn't, she wants to believe him to be the person that she loved and fell in love with, but it's like he's kept so many secrets and there's so many lies, it's like, can their relationship survive all of that? Like, why he's doing what he's doing? And that's the $1 million question. So, but along with all of that, we got an interesting thing with Magic talking to Ian. I love Ian's like, yeah, you're bringing me out here all of a sudden, leaving the lab. He's like, if we were dating, I would think you were trying to break up with me right now. Magic ends up saying, like, he got his nickname in Vietnam. It's like, yeah, I know. He's like, yeah, I know you were in Vietnam. You talk about it, like, all the time, is what Ian was saying. But Magic's nickname came about because he had an inkling about things, just kind of a feeling. And that's what his commanding officer said. But then at one point, he's like, yeah, and then, like, I had this feeling, like, not like someone was touching me, but someone was kind of at the door, and they were pressing on it, and I opened that door and let that person in, and he's like, I blacked out. I was like, wait. And he's like, yeah, and when I came to, we were celebrating. Apparently, I had saved not only, like, my commanding officer, was it Tom Beckett, but my entire unit. And it's like, wait, are you saying this? Like, yeah. Sam jumped into me. I was like, dude, that's so, because we've never gotten the other side of that perspective to people. It's like, right, you're just like, it's a blank spot in your memory, and people are filling you in about, like, oh, really? You'll probably think, like, oh, maybe it was a hangover, like, oh, like something happened. I just don't remember, but getting that perspective and having it so tied to the story. Now, this is what I want to know. To anyone, do let me know in the comments down below. The scenes we saw, were they actually scenes from the original show, or were they scenes that they shot specifically for this show to make it seem like it was from the original show, or could it be scenes that were from the original show that they just did? I couldn't tell. It seemed like that was older footage, but it, like, from what little I've seen of the show, it seemed like that might have been them filming recent footage and making it seem like it was older footage, but I don't know. Because the thing is that the way Magic said is like, right, that was Tom Beckett, that was Sam's brother. So that begs the question, so that being such an important story to Sam's character means he had to have, like, that had to have happened in the original series, because that was something so specific. So I just don't know if that scene was, like, it just, the way it was filmed, the way it looked, it didn't seem like it was. It did seem like it was made to, but that could be my mistake. I don't know. But what I love, and it's also kind of sad, but there's also a beauty to all of this, is Magic ended up, he had dreams about Sam. Like, he could see Sam, but it was like, this is someone he's never met, until he became an admiral, and he found out about the Quantum Leap project, and he's like, oh my God, finally saw a picture of the man he met. Like, oh, I kept seeing this guy's face and never knew. I owe my life to this guy, because in the original timeline, like, they had an entire platoon, including Magic and including Tom, died. So now it is a situation of, yeah, like, that's why he found out about Sam being lost, and in space and time, and so that's what made him want to restart the Quantum Leap project. He wanted to be the head of, like, restarting it, because he's like, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Sam. Me and so many people in my platoon, because I was supposed to die in the original timeline along with my platoon, and it's like, I owe it to Sam, and so I wanted to kind of pay it forward and trying to get him back, because he gives that, was it that Marine motto of like no one left behind, and he felt like he owed it to Sam. And now you have Ian being like, right, Sam being lost for so long. It's like, no. We are going to get Ben back. We have to, because I'm not going to leave him behind. Like we need to bring him back. And so I thought that was such a beautiful connection in the show, because it also gives us a present day example of, because the people that Ben's kind of saved and we know what their lives eventually turn into, we learn the after effects, like, from Addison, but we don't actually get to experience those after effects. Now we kind of see like, oh, this in particular instance is a long-term effect of Sam's quantum leaping, is magic being alive, and because he is alive, it allowed him to be alive, and things have gotten to where they are now. Because if magic wasn't alive, like, who's to say this particular group of people would be together right now? It could be a completely different group in front of like this quantum. It's like, just once again and it wasn't a small change, it was a massive change that continued to have massive ripples all across time, and have led us to where we are now. So it all kind of feeds into itself, the timey-wiminess of it all. And speaking of that, they ended up finding out that Janice is basically trying to use their files and access to it, and kind of using Ziggy, where it's like, oh, we could predict what ripple effects Ben could have on the past and stuff, right? Well, she's trying to do the same thing to them. She's trying to predict their next moves in the near future. Like, oh, what are Ian, Magic, Jen, and Addison, like, what are they going to do, like, in the next couple days? So she can predict and kind of move around and finding out what they can do, what they're planning on doing. Predicting that gives her an opportunity to be one step ahead, whatever it is that she's trying to accomplish. So I just thought that was all kind of a wild situation to be in, which accidental segue there, that being the ending where our boy Ben finds himself what seems to be kind of like almost like a very, so I think next episode is going to be a Western, because it has like that wild west aesthetic to it. So it seems like might be more of a Western episode, and I think that's going to be pretty dope. So but really that's all I want to talk about. I should say I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us in totality. What this what the story ends up being about the person that Ben's in, and what the circumstances are. Because it seemed like, I think it was a grandfather and granddaughter situation that he kind of jumped in the middle of. The way she was talking about, like, oh yeah, that was your son, and you didn't, obviously we're just as lost as Ben, because we're jumping right in the middle of all of it. But I'm really excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.